Welcome, the most captivating science fiction stories where mystery, action, and love intertwine are here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. The wind howled like something prehistoric and deeply offended, rattling the windows of Marcus Webb's cabin with enough force to make him wonder if his insurance policy covered acts of meteorological warfare. He'd been stirring his third cup of coffee, the real stuff, not the freeze-dried sadness he'd been rationing, when the sound of breaking glass from his kitchen made him realize that winter had just become significantly more complicated. Marcus approached the kitchen with the careful steps of a man who had learned that most unexpected sounds in remote locations fell into two categories: expensive repairs or imminent death. What he found was neither, though it did fall squarely into a third category he hadn't previously considered: alien home invasion. A woman crouched by his shattered back door, and Marcus's first thought was that hypothermia did strange things to perception because she appeared to be glowing faintly blue, like a human-shaped mood ring stuck on freezing to death. Her ears were distinctly pointed, her skin had that translucent quality of fine porcelain, and she was shivering so violently that she looked like she was vibrating between dimensions. "Please," she said, her voice carrying an accent that sounded vaguely European, but with undertones that suggested Europe might be located in another galaxy. "I need warmth. I can cook for you. I can bear your children. Just please let me stay by your fire." Marcus blinked several times, wondering if isolation had finally driven him to hallucinations that came with very specific domestic offers. "I'm sorry, did you just break into my house to propose a combination employment and breeding arrangement?" "Yes," she replied with the desperate sincerity of someone for whom this was a perfectly reasonable negotiation strategy. "I am very good cook. Well, I will be good cook. Your species' food preparation cannot be that complicated." "Right." Marcus rubbed his temples, where a headache was forming with the particular intensity that came from trying to process information that violated several laws of physics and social convention. "And the children part. If desired, my species is compatible with yours for reproduction. It would be mutually beneficial arrangement." She attempted to stand but swayed dangerously, her blue luminescence flickering like a failing LED. "I am excellent genetic contributor, very intelligent, very strong, very desperate." The last word came out as a whisper, and Marcus found himself moving forward instinctively as she collapsed. Up close, her skin was indeed faintly luminescent, and cold to the touch in a way that suggested she was well beyond normal hypothermia and venturing into temperatures that should have been medically impossible. "Jesus," he muttered, scooping her up and carrying her toward the living room, where his fireplace was putting out enough heat to rival a small fusion reactor. "How long have you been out there?" "3 of your Earth days," she replied, her voice gaining strength as they approached the warmth. "Maybe 4. Your planet's rotation is confusing, and I may have been unconscious for portions of the experience." Marcus deposited her in his best armchair, the one he'd salvaged from his old restaurant before the health inspectors had finished their creative reinterpretation of his business license. She immediately curled toward the fire like a cat discovering sunlight, and the blue glow of her skin began to intensify and warm toward something approaching normal human coloration. "You're not from around here," he said, which felt like an understatement worthy of awards. "No, I am from Kepler 442b, though you probably know it by your astronomical designation rather than our name, which translates roughly to the place where it doesn't try to kill you with frozen water from the sky." "Catchy," Marcus said, settling into his own chair and trying to process the fact that he was apparently hosting an interstellar refugee who had very specific ideas about domestic arrangements. "So you're an alien." "And you are a human," she replied, as if they were exchanging pleasantries about the weather rather than confirming each other's species. "I am called Lyra. You smell like cooking oils and loneliness, which suggests you are either a chef or someone who has given up on social interaction." Possibly both. Marcus couldn't decide whether to be insulted or impressed by her observational skills. Former chef, current hermit, the loneliness is a lifestyle choice, not a medical condition. Lyra said, nodding sagely. A professional food preparer who has retreated from society. This explains why your kitchen contains adequate equipment but smells of sadness and microwaved meals. My kitchen does not smell of sadness. It does. Also regret and something that might be decomposing vegetables. She shifted in the chair, her color continuing to normalize as the warmth soaked into her system. But it has potential. I could help you restore it to proper functionality. Marcus found himself staring at this strange woman who had quite literally crashed into his life, with offers of culinary assistance and genetic contribution. 3 years of self-imposed isolation had not prepared him for someone who could diagnose his emotional state through olfactory analysis, while simultaneously critiquing his food storage practices. "So let me get this straight," he said finally. "You're an alien from another planet who crashed on Earth, nearly died from cold exposure, broke into my house, and your first instinct is to offer to cook my meals and have my babies." In that order, yes, though the reproductive aspect is negotiable depending on your preferences and compatibility requirements. Lyra tilted her head, studying him with eyes that seemed to shift color like opals. "You appear to be healthy breeding stock, but I recognize that human mating rituals are complex and often involve extensive courtship periods and questionable musical choices." Questionable musical choices. "I have been monitoring your radio transmissions. Your species appears to believe that declarations of romantic intent should be accompanied by repetitive rhythmic sounds and lyrics of dubious poetry quality." Marcus felt a laugh building in his chest, the first genuine amusement he'd experienced in months. "You've been listening to pop music and concluded that humans are musically challenged." Among other things. Lyra's expression grew more serious. "Your species shows remarkable adaptability and creativity, but also a troubling tendency towards self-destruction and the production of entertainment content that defies logical explanation." Reality television. Among other cultural artifacts that suggest your civilization may be in decline. She paused, her gaze returning to the fire. "Though given that my own planet is dying, and my people are scattered across space looking for new homes, I may not be in a position to critique anyone else's societal choices." The weight of that statement settled between them, and Marcus realized that beneath her bizarre introduction and clinical observations, Lyra was simply someone very far from home, very cold and very alone. It was a feeling he understood better than he cared to admit. "All right," he said finally. "You can stay until the storm passes and you figure out your next move, but we're going to establish some ground rules about this arrangement." Marcus woke to the smell of something that could charitably be described as breakfast, if breakfast had been invented by someone who had only heard rumors about food, and decided to experiment with chemistry instead. The smoke alarm was expressing its opinion about Lyra's culinary efforts with the persistent enthusiasm of a fire safety evangelist, while from the kitchen came sounds that suggested either cooking or a small-scale industrial accident. "What are you doing in there?" he called, stumbling toward the kitchen with the particular dread of someone who had left an alien unsupervised with cooking equipment. "Preparing your morning sustenance," Lyra replied cheerfully. "I have analyzed your food storage systems and created optimal nutritional combinations based on available ingredients." Marcus entered the kitchen to find what appeared to be the aftermath of a food fight between competing alien civilizations. Lyra stood over his stove wearing one of his old aprons, which on her looked less like kitchen attire and more like a fashion statement from a very avant-garde cooking show, stirring something in a pan that was moving independently of her spoon. "Is it supposed to be doing that?" Marcus asked, pointing at the substance that seemed to be attempting to escape the pan through coordinated undulation. I may have miscalculated the molecular binding properties of your Earth proteins, Lyra admitted, prodding the writhing mass with scientific curiosity. On my planet, combining similar ingredients results in stable nutritional matrices. Here, they appear to achieve consciousness and existential anxiety. That's scrambled eggs, Marcus said weakly. Or it was. What did you do to them? I enhanced them with minerals from your refrigeration unit's ice crystals and applied thermal energy in patterns designed to maximize nutrient absorption. She paused, watching as the eggs made what appeared to be a coordinated attempt to climb out of the pan. I believe I may have inadvertently created primitive life. Marcus moved carefully around the stove, noting that several of his other pans contained substances that defied easy classification. One held what might have been pancakes if pancakes were typically purple and emitted a faint humming sound. Another contained coffee that appeared to be glowing softly and occasionally sparked. Lyra, he said gently, maybe we should start with something simpler. But I wish to contribute meaningfully to our domestic arrangement, she protested. Food preparation is essential for survival and social bonding among most species. I have observed this through your entertainment transmissions. You've been watching cooking shows, among other educational programming. Your species has remarkable dedication to documenting food preparation techniques, though I note significant inconsistencies in methodology and concerning levels of dramatic tension around what should be routine nutritional provision. Marcus couldn't argue with that assessment of competitive cooking shows. He gently took the spoon from her hands, noting that her skin was now a healthy peachy tone rather than the alarming blue of the previous night. The warmth of the cabin had clearly done her good, though it had apparently also given her enough energy to wage war against breakfast. Let me show you how we do this on Earth, he said, clearing space on the stove and reaching for fresh ingredients. The key to good cooking isn't enhancement or optimization. It's understanding what you're working with and respecting its natural properties. This seems inefficient, Lyra observed, watching as he cracked eggs with simple, practiced motions. You are not attempting to maximize their nutritional density or improve their molecular structure. No, I'm trying to make them taste good. Marcus added butter to the pan, the familiar ritual of cooking beginning to ease the tension in his shoulders that he hadn't realized was there. Sometimes the simplest approach is the best approach. Lyra watched with intense concentration as he scrambled the eggs properly, her pointed ears twitching slightly as she tracked every movement. You have considerable skill in this area. Your muscle memory suggests extensive practice. I used to be a chef, Marcus said, then caught himself. I mean, I am a chef, was a chef. It's complicated. You experienced professional difficulties that led to your current isolation, Lyra said with the matter-of-fact directness that he was beginning to recognize as her default communication style. This is common among highly skilled individuals who face systemic challenges or personal catastrophes. Marcus paused in his stirring. Are you analyzing me again? I'm attempting to understand your emotional and professional background in order to optimize our cohabitation arrangement, she replied. Your cooking techniques demonstrate expertise, but your living situation suggests withdrawal from professional. The first sign of trouble came not from government helicopters or alien rescue ships, but from Marcus's suddenly overachieving fireplace, which had begun producing enough heat to warm a small shopping mall while consuming the same amount of wood it always had. Lyra had been tinkering with what she called thermal efficiency optimization, and the results were impressive enough to be visible from orbit. I may have miscalculated the energy output parameters, she admitted, standing before the fireplace that was now glowing with the intensity of a miniature sun. Your heating system is more responsive to quantum thermal manipulation than expected. Marcus stared at his modest stone fireplace, which was radiating waves of heat that made the air shimmer, and had turned his living room into something resembling a tropical paradise. Lyra, please tell me, You didn't turn my fireplace into a fusion reactor. Not fusion, precisely. More like controlled matter-energy conversion using locally available carbon-based fuel sources. She adjusted something invisible in the air above the flames, her fingers moving with the precision of someone operating controls that existed in dimensions Marcus couldn't perceive. The efficiency improvements are quite remarkable. We have achieved approximately 3,000% improvement in thermal output. 3,000%, Marcus repeated weakly. Give or take a few 100%. Precision is difficult when working with primitive combustion systems. Lyra looked pleased with herself, apparently not recognizing that turning someone's fireplace into a small star might be considered problematic. Your heating costs will be significantly reduced. The sound of approaching aircraft saved Marcus from having to explain why energy signatures that could be seen from space might attract unwanted attention. The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline with the purposeful movement of official interest, its sensors undoubtedly trying to understand why a remote cabin in the Canadian wilderness was suddenly broadcasting thermal readings that suggested either a small volcano or a very serious barbecue. "We have visitors," Marcus said, moving to the window and noting the unmarked aircraft circling his property with professional curiosity. Lyra joined him at the window, her expression shifting to something Marcus was beginning to recognize as her problem-solving face. "Government reconnaissance. They have detected the thermal anomalies from my modifications. Can you unmodify them?" "Not quickly. The quantum thermal matrix requires approximately 6 hours to safely decompress, and rapid shutdown could result in what you might call explosive decompression of localized spacetime." "You mean it could blow up?" "Blow up, create a small black hole, or possibly open a temporary rift to my home dimension. The mathematics are complex and the variables are numerous." Lyra studied the circling helicopter with scientific detachment. "We should probably avoid rapid shutdown unless we wish to make this situation significantly more complicated." Marcus found himself wondering how his quiet hermit life had suddenly become a situation that could potentially involve black holes and interdimensional rifts. "So, what do we do?" "We hide," Lyra said simply. "I have some experience with avoiding detection by technologically inferior surveillance systems." She moved to what Marcus had assumed was a blank wall and began manipulating the air in patterns that made his eyes water to follow. Suddenly, the wall wasn't blank anymore. It was covered with controls that looked like they belonged on a spacecraft, all apparently constructed from components she had somehow extracted from his household appliances. "When did you build that?" Marcus asked. "During the past 3 days while you were sleeping. I required something to occupy my time, and your dwelling systems were remarkably primitive. I took the liberty of integrating some basic improvements." She activated what appeared to be a cloaking device assembled from his old television, microwave, and what might have been the motor from his coffee grinder. "This should render us undetectable to their scanning equipment." The effect was immediate and unsettling. The cabin didn't disappear exactly, but it seemed to become less interesting, as if the very idea of looking at it closely had become tedious. Marcus could feel the psychological pressure to look elsewhere, to focus on literally anything other than the building he was standing inside. "That's incredible," he said. "Basic camouflage technology. Though I admit I am impressed by how much processing power I was able to extract from your entertainment and food preparation devices. Your species builds remarkably sophisticated electronics, but uses them for trivially simple tasks." Outside, the helicopter had begun flying in wider circles, its occupants apparently unable to maintain focus on the cabin, despite the obvious thermal signature that had brought them here in the first place. Marcus watched the pilot shake his head repeatedly, as if trying to clear some kind of mental fog. "They will eventually overcome the psychological barriers," Lyra said, monitoring the aircraft through sensors that she had somehow integrated into his window blinds. The camouflage system works by making observation psychologically uncomfortable, but determined surveillance can power through the effect. How long do we have? Perhaps an hour before they realize they are being mentally influenced and begin systematic grid searches. Lyra's fingers danced over her improvised control panel. However, I am also receiving signals from my people's ships. Marcus felt a cold that had nothing to do with the weather settling in his chest. Your rescue. Possibly. The signals are concerning. Lyra's expression darkened as she processed whatever information she was receiving. The ships are approaching Earth, but their communications patterns suggest military formation rather than rescue operations. Military formation. My people are desperate, Marcus. Our homeworld is dying, our population is scattered across refugee ships, and we have been searching for decades for a suitable planet to colonize. She turned away from her controls, her eyes carrying a weight that made Marcus realize how young she actually was despite her scientific expertise. I fear they may have decided that your planet is suitable for settlement, whether your species agrees or not. The helicopter outside had been joined by a second aircraft, and both were now flying methodical search patterns that suggested they were working to overcome whatever psychological interference Lyra's camouflage was creating. Meanwhile, high above the atmosphere, an unknown number of alien ships were apparently approaching with potentially hostile intentions. So we're hiding from my government, while your government prepares to possibly invade my planet, Marcus summarized. That is an accurate assessment of our current situation, Lyra confirmed. And you're the only person on Earth who knows about the invasion and the only person in your fleet who might object to it. Also accurate. Marcus found himself laughing, the sound carrying more than a little hysteria. You know, when you offered to cook my meals and have my babies, you didn't mention that it might involve preventing an interplanetary war. I was focused on immediate survival priorities, Lyra said defensively. Long-term geopolitical implications seemed premature to discuss during our initial negotiations. Right. Marcus watched as the helicopters began flying in tighter patterns, their crews apparently beginning to overcome the psychological barriers of the cloaking system. So, what do we do now? Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing complex patterns on her improvised control panel. I believe, she said finally, that I may need to choose between my species and my conscience, and possibly between my duty as a scout and my growing attachment to this place. This place, this cabin, this planet, this arrangement we have developed. She looked at him directly, her opalescent eyes reflecting the impossible light of his overachieving fireplace. I have found something here that I did not expect to find when I first broke through your door seeking warmth. What's that? Home, she said simply. And I discover that I am reluctant to see it destroyed by either your species' fear or mine's desperation. The moment of truth arrived simultaneously from above and below, with Lyra's communication array crackling to life, just as the government helicopters finally broke through her psychological camouflage and began descending toward the cabin with the focused intensity of bureaucrats who had found their target. Fleet Command to Scout Unit 7, came a voice speaking in harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache, translated through Lyra's improvised communication system into English that carried undertones of military authority. Report status immediately. Invasion timeline has been accelerated. Lyra stared at the communication panel she had built from his kitchen appliances, her face cycling through expressions that suggested she was having a very complicated conversation with her own conscience. Marcus, she said quietly, I need to ask you to trust me completely for the next few minutes. Trust you to do what? Something that will either save both our species or get us both killed by mine. She began activating controls with the rapid precision of someone who had made a decision that terrified them. Your government officials will be here in approximately 3 minutes. My fleet commanders expect a status report in approximately 2 minutes. and I have approximately 1 minute to figure out how to prevent what could be the shortest interplanetary war in galactic history. Outside, the helicopters had landed, and Marcus could see figures in tactical gear moving toward the cabin with the careful efficiency of people who were trained to handle situations involving unknown aliens and potentially hostile technology. Through his enhanced windows, apparently another of Lyra's improvements, he could see their heat signatures and noted that they were carrying equipment that looked substantially more sophisticated than standard government issue. Those aren't regular military, he observed. No, based on their equipment configurations, they appear to be from your species' extraterrestrial contact division. Lyra was working at her control panel with increasing urgency, which means they already know I am here and have protocols for this situation. We have an extraterrestrial contact division. Most spacefaring civilizations do, though they rarely advertise their existence to the general population. The communication array crackled again, and this time the voice carried distinct notes of impatience. Scout Unit 7, respond immediately or face disciplinary action. Lyra took a deep breath and activated her transmitter. Fleet Command, this is Scout Unit 7. I have completed preliminary assessment of the target planet. Report findings. Is the planet suitable for immediate colonization? Marcus watched as Lyra's expression shifted through several complex emotions before settling on something that looked like determined resignation. Fleet Command. The planet is inhabited by a sophisticated indigenous species that has achieved technological civilization and demonstrates complex social structures. Immediate colonization would require significant military action against an established population. This is acceptable. Indigenous populations can be relocated or integrated as labor resources. No, Lyra said firmly, and Marcus realized that she had just committed treason against her own species. It is not acceptable. These beings are sentient, technologically capable, and have legitimate claim to their homeworld. I recommend initiating diplomatic contact rather than military action. The silence from the communication system stretched long enough for the government agents outside to reach the cabin's front door. Their knock was polite but carried the particular authority of people who had badges and were prepared to use them. Scout Unit 7, came the response from the fleet. You appear to have been compromised by indigenous influence. You will be extracted immediately for psychological evaluation and disciplinary action. I have not been compromised, Lyra replied, even as she began activating what Marcus recognized as some kind of recording system. I have been educated. This species is not suitable for conquest or displacement. They are suitable for alliance. Marcus moved to answer the door, figuring that hiding was no longer an option and diplomacy might be their only hope. The agents outside were led by a woman in her 50s, who wore the particular expression of someone who had seen enough weird things that alien contact was just another item on her Tuesday checklist. Mr. Webb, she said, displaying credentials that identified her as Agent Sarah Collins, Department of Extraordinary Circumstances. We understand you may have encountered a visitor of extraterrestrial origin. That would be accurate, Marcus replied, stepping aside to let them enter. She's in the kitchen arguing with her commanding officers about whether or not they should invade the planet. Agent Collins paused in the doorway, her expression suggesting that this was not the standard response she usually received during first contact situations. She's arguing against the invasion. Quite vigorously, actually. I think she's committed treason. From the kitchen came Lyra's voice, now speaking directly to both her fleet commanders and the government agents simultaneously through her improvised communication system. Fleet Command, I am transmitting complete records of my interactions with this species, including detailed analysis of their technological capabilities, social structures, and potential for peaceful cooperation. Scout Unit 7, cease transmission immediately. I am also transmitting these records to the indigenous species governmental representatives, along with complete technical specifications for our fleet capabilities, defensive systems, and tactical doctrine.